Blog Talk Radio.
NCX Group, the leader in information security consulting, is proud to present Secure 2020. Here now is NCX founder and CEO, Mike Fitzpatrick.
Good afternoon and hello from the West Coast here in Southern California. I'm glad to be back on the air with you. As many of you have been listening to the Watchdog Report for the last few months, and the listeners and the responses have been outstanding. We've been getting about 20,000 listens a month to our podcast. And it really facilitated a name change. Since security has become more global, since privacy has become more global, we needed to take a different look at the show title, the direction, and where we're going with our interviews. We really want to focus on what the world is going to become from a privacy standpoint and a security standpoint over the next 7 years, let's say. That's why the name Secure 2020. With that in mind, we have changed the name, as I've said, to Secure 2020. The intent is to have global thought leaders with us each week in the area of information security and data privacy. The first guest that I have for today, I couldn't think of anybody better. The gentleman that we have with us today, Dr. Larry Ponemon, is the foremost authority on all of the research that those in my field, in the assessment field, in the practitioner field, rely on. Larry has and his team have done just some groundbreaking work in the area of privacy and the cost of a data security breach, the cost of cybercrime, the impact to healthcare, and it just could not ask for a better first guest in this new format. With that, Dr. Larry Ponemon. Larry, how are you?
Doing great, Mike, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. It's a pleasure to be your first guest.
Well, you know, you and I go back a long way in doing the shows and talking about data security all the way back to the original cost of a data security breach. And my God, when that first came out, for me as a practitioner, and working with companies on data security, that was the holy grail. That information was gold. So I appreciate every study that you do, every bit of research that you conduct, and it just really helps us drive the point home with the executives that we talk to. In light of the research that you've done, and there's 3 studies that I have sitting here on my desk. Mm-hmm. The state of application security, the most recent one that just came out last week, the cost of cybercrime study, and then going back a year or so on the data security of small healthcare. I think it, in light of ObamaCare, the Affordable Care Act more formally, I think these studies point to some interesting statistics as far as how accessible our data is within the healthcare space. Based upon those studies, what do you think the risk is to healthcare providers today?
Well, Mike, I think we're starting with a very good question, and I may not have all the answers, but I can talk from a research perspective. What I see is some very interesting and very serious issues and concerns. In the healthcare space, obviously, data about us, about people, our proverbial patient record is a crown jewel piece of information. In other words, we really don't want people snooping and reading that record, and we certainly don't want to release that record without permission. And so if you talk to anyone, whether it's an 88-year-old or a 16-year-old, and you talk about the information contained in your healthcare or medical file or patient record, it's sensitive stuff. And now, despite that, there's the emergence of new technologies in healthcare, which are in many cases really good, and they improve productivity and may affect the quality of patient care. So we don't want to actually give up on technology in healthcare because of privacy concerns. But in general, there's a trend to creating the concept that your health record is no longer private, but is now a public record. What I mean by that is this dichotomy between information that you own and control versus information that is controlled by a third party. And what I mean by a public record is it's a record in the hands of the government at the federal, state, and local municipal levels. And so privacy and security in this day and age is potentially a real threat to that information that we hold so sacred.
Well, I agree with you. I think that people are really not comprehending on both sides of the issue, whether it's the consumer or whether it is the healthcare provider, because as you know, we're doing assessments for organizations, and one of the more interesting discussions that I've had with a healthcare provider after a data security breach was the lackadaisical approach that they were taking to continue to secure the data. Matter of fact, the general counsel for this particular hospital, and it's a large hospital, Larry, said that I'm less concerned about fixing the issues and more concerned about what I can turn over to the insurance because that's what it's for. There was there was no real, what's the word I'm looking for? No real concern about due care and really doing what they need to do from an organizational standpoint to protect the data and the integrity of the records. Now with ObamaCare upon us, or the Affordable Care Act, I got to see this being more of an issue as far as the data security across all aspects of healthcare, don't you?
Oh, no, absolutely, absolutely. Going back to, real life experience and just how lackadaisical or, in some cases, incompetent healthcare providers are in protecting this information, we do benchmarking. And one of the projects where we were benchmarking about 80 hospitals located throughout the United States, I'll never forget, at one of the sites, one of the hospitals, we were trying to determine whether that particular hospital had data loss over the past 12 months or 24 months. And the answer emphatically from their compliance people and the HIPAA people and the people who report to Health and Human Service, no, we didn't have anything. We're doing fine. Everything's great. We're better than our competitors in terms of protecting information. And about 2 days later, we were interviewing some of the admin people. These are people who are in the rank and file, right? They're in the trenches. And I asked the same question. They said, oh, yeah, we lose data all the time. And then I said, well, what do you say all the time? Like daily, weekly? Yeah, every few days there's something lost. And I said, well, what's the biggest data breach that you had in the last, say, 12 or 24 months? And they said, oh, yeah, we lost about 5,000 records when we were converting over to this new system. So even within these organizations, there's a huge gap, right, between what people know and what they actually do. And I'm not saying that the people at the high end are out of touch, but I think they're really not thinking about patient records and security and privacy issues as a top-of-mind issue. Now, the second part of your comment and question about the Affordable Care Act, ObamaCare, oh, my God, I don't even know where to begin. Well, we now know that we weren't really that ready to take enrollment, but that's just the top of a very large iceberg. Because in the iceberg, certainly at sea level and underneath the water, is a security issue, right? The idea that if it's not a high-quality website with good security controls, then you're putting the public at great risk. So there's a security element in and of itself, which is potentially a problem. And, you and I are both in touch with lots of experts who deal with this issue every day, and, they're starting to look at this as a potential security Pearl Harbor, at least with respect to healthcare information. The second issue, of course, is even with good security, it's not about security only. When you basically are sharing information across governmental entities like the IRS, Department of Homeland Security, maybe TSA, maybe even the post office, I don't know. The end result is you run the process of potentially violating someone's privacy rights. I don't think our health records were intended to be viewed by IRS, for example, but the fact is that we need to validate that people have a certain income in order to qualify for different types of health classes of health care, I suppose. And so that connection means that IRS and certainly other entities are going to have access to your information vis-a-vis health information exchanges and, other large national databases. So it's a very interesting and potentially a very scary time for the American public.
No, I agree with you. It's in some of the assessments that we've done in talking with a lot of these organizations, the accessibility to information. I remember in one particular case, we walked in and we were doing part of a physical security assessment in this particular hospital. Walked in, found a room with an X-ray machine in the room, brand new. They had just uncrated it, and it was attached to the network. No username, no password, and we got full accessibility to the network. More importantly, no one challenged credentials or challenged us for credentials on the hospital grounds, which I find interesting. Here in California, it's even a little more disturbing than that. A lot of the power controls, because of earthquake issues, are regulated by the state, and they're regulated to be outside the building with open access.
Wow.
So from a business continuity standpoint or a business disruption standpoint, anybody could literally walk up, hit the power controls to the hospital, and shut it down. To your point, as far as the iceberg is concerned, and the bottom of that iceberg, we find that a lot of these hospitals, one, their IT staffs are outmanned. They really don't have the bandwidth to effectively address information security. Their teams are typically 1 to maybe 7 people in the smaller hospitals. Typically, we find 3,000 plus high-level vulnerabilities when we conduct a security assessment.
Wow.
Within these hospitals. They're not prepared on the ground, I don't think, based upon what we're seeing. And that brings us to an interesting point in the application security study that you did, in pointing to the fact that 90% of all security vulnerabilities are found in the applications, and 80% of the spending is on network security.
Glad you saw that. I mean, it wasn't a typo. It's the real stuff. And unfortunately, the nature of the world is if we spend this amount last year, even if we have a finite budget, we're going to spend the same. We're not going to challenge the fact that maybe the world has changed or there are different types of attacks and attack vectors to deal with. If we spend X amount of dollars in network security, we're going to spend X plus $1 or X, but it's not going to change a whole lot in terms of total percentage. And it doesn't leave a lot of room for other security issues that could be more salient. And as you mentioned with the stats, most of the really serious vulnerabilities, those that infiltrate networks and ultimately enterprise systems, happen because of insecure applications. And so, there's a real issue here in terms of what organizations should be doing from a budgeting perspective. And, one thing that we recommend is use this concept called zero-based budgeting. I wish our federal government does this. But the idea is that things that you're spending on today may not be that valuable. Even if you feel like you have to do it, there may be better, more efficient ways, and take the cash savings because you're not spending on things that are less important and start spending on things that could really help you. And that mindset of zero-based budgeting and security is a foreign concept. Very, very few organizations kind of do that.
No, I agree with you. I think one of the things, and we've talked about this in years past, I think the research that you're doing in conjunction with Tripwire on the state of security and really looking at things from a risk-based model rather than a policy and control model, I think is the future of information security. That's what we've done for 10 years, and we've been the lone voice in the woods talking about, hey guys, really just let's focus on what's important and not necessarily paperwork.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You've done a great job, by the way, in building your practice, and your reputation is second to none in our community. And that's because there's a methodology, there's a structure to what you do and the advice you give to your clients, and that's really why risk-based is so important. It's a framework that says if I have a high risk, very simple, I'm going to spend, and I'm going to try to defend my organization from the high risk. Low risk, I'm going to worry about it, because even if it's low risk, the sum of a lot of low-risk events can be a big problem, but I'm not going to spend as much resources, and if I have to not do something today, I'm going to make sure I'm not doing it on the low-risk end. And that mentality, which seems like so commonsensical, is difficult for security practitioners because we're crisis-driven. We spend our day fighting fires rather than thinking strategically about what we need to do.
Well, I think that brings up a great point. A lot of the organizations that, again, we're working with in primarily healthcare and energy, we really don't find strategic thinking in the implementation of their security practice.
Right.
It's more this constant belief that if I apply the right technology, I'm going to solve this. It's also the belief that IT is the sole responsible party for data security, and that can be more further from the truth than anything else. So I guess the question is, out of the research that you've done, and specifically with what we have in front of us now, what do you think organizations should be doing first? Based upon the research and your experience, what do you think they should be tackling first from a strategic standpoint?
Yeah, that's a great question, and again, this is based on my experience and some of our research findings, but I still think we need to do more to kind of help organizations move from the tactician or tactical level to pure strategic levels of thinking about security and related aspects like data protection and privacy. But one of the things that we've seen as a good starting point is get a handle on governance. It sounds like a low-tech thing, and you know what it is? It is a low-tech thing. It's not about technology. That's a decision you make later. The governance is about assigning accountability, responsibility, the proverbial parity principle, where you have people in charge of making certain things happen. And if it doesn't happen, you're basically held to a standard. And that standard is if you're not doing your job, you're out of there from a security perspective. If you are, as an employee, are not complying with the rules, there are enforceable rules, and there are things that will happen as a result. So building a governance framework that kind of gets your people in an organization, not just your security team, but pretty much every end user, every person in the organization, to take responsibility for their part in achieving a stronger security posture is a good first step. And strategy also gets you to places like, where should you position the Chief Information Security Officer? How do you make sure that the communication between that individual and the CEO and maybe even the board of directors happens at regular intervals, like on the state of security? How do you make sure that information is not filtered? Because if you're security, guess what? The information is bad news at times, and, someone between you and your CEO might say, I don't want to tell the CEO that we're not doing our job. Governance also means that you avoid conflicts of interest. So if you're the CISO and you report to the CIO, and a key finding on or a problem in the security area is because the CIO organization is not doing something particularly well, that's potentially an issue, right, in terms of how do you get the message to the the chief decision maker, the CEO, and maybe even the board of directors. Once you get governance figured out, then you can start thinking about people, like who do I need to have on my team? What are their characteristics? How much do I have to pay them? All of that important stuff. But you also at that point could start to think about technology. What technologies exist today that may be affordable within our budget that could help me maintain a strong security posture? And it's not a cookie cutter, although a lot of companies kind of implement the cookie cutter. The CISO moves from company A to company B in different industries, and in company A they kind of had these 10 technologies, and now they move to company B and they think they can apply the same technology frameworks, but it doesn't work that well. So again, governance, then personnel, and actually, later in the decision-making process, you start thinking about better technologies, and then trying to integrate it all so that you don't have an interoperability problem. That's what I recommend.
No, I think those are all fantastic points. One of the, and again, this gets to a position and a role within an organization. And one of the things that we see across the board is that chief security officer or that ISO within the organization, typically we will find them buried somewhere mid-management within the IT organization, and not really having a board reporting position within the organization. Are you finding that within your research, or is that something that you're looking at with when you do the research?
Great questions, by the way, and I appreciate that. What we basically find is that the Chief Information Security Officer, even though there's a title chief, is in fact in many companies a middle-level manager. And more importantly, that individual is 4 or even 5 steps away from the CEO. And the more steps you are under the CEO or away from the CEO, the more likely your message, especially if it's a negative message, will be filtered. And so it's a big problem. If you're going to be a C-level executive and have because remember, if you say I'm the chief anything, you not only are, it's not just a business card thing. It means that you have personal liability.
Exactly.
And, in some cases, based on federal regulations, you are the accountable party if your organization is fraudulent or grossly negligent. You get into a world of hurt just because you're the C-level. It's irrespective of whether you're a manager, director, executive, vice president, or whomever. So the key variable is position is everything. If you're going to develop a good governance process, you have to command the authority to make tough decisions in security, and that means that you have to be highly positioned.
No, I agree. Unfortunately, a lot of these organizations are not taking that next step, and I think a lot of it comes down to job security in a lot of respects for those that are above them on the food chain. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's our view of it as we assess the organizations and work with them. I was just going to ask, with web applications, a lot of what we're seeing in healthcare to address the moves that need to be made under the Affordable Care Act, there is a huge push towards electronic medical records, electronic health records, EHR, and they're doing this through cloud solutions, through third-party software providers, and really hitting at that application side of it. With the data that you have in the state of the application security breach, and that information really doesn't point to a successful implementation based upon what I'm seeing in the data. What steps do you think these healthcare organizations should take to ensure the privacy of that data?
Yeah, it's unfortunately a mess right now, as you just mentioned. Obviously, there's a real sea change right now in terms of practitioners or clinicians or hospitals, healthcare providers, generally speaking, looking at mHealth, mobile health, or eHealth types of solutions to create more efficiency, and in their mind to help the patient, to move from the reactive types of medicine, someone has a heart attack and you treat the poor person, to being preventive. And so more and more of these apps, things that, could work on your smartphone or your tablet or laptop, it sounds like a really great thing, but it has the potential to create a whole bunch of security issues. A lot of these technologies, which are recommended now by healthcare providers, are not vetted or tested. The whole issue around cloud is kind of another story, because our research on cloud, at least historically, suggests that most cloud environments are less secure than on-premises IT, but that gap is changing pretty quickly, and there are some cloud providers that are providing a better, more secure infrastructure than on-premises IT. If you don't have the resources and you're small, like a small hospital, community hospital, clinic, and so forth, moving to the cloud may not actually present huge issues, but you have to have control over that information. You have to know what you're getting into, because some cloud providers, not all cloud providers, despite the improvements that we've seen in our, based on our research, some of these providers really are not focused on security at all, one iota, and the rest why their prices are so cheap. So if you make the decision we're moving to the cloud to save money, normally that leads to a security snafu down the road.
No, I agree with you, and we're down to just about 4 minutes left here, and so I'm going to hit you with a final question.
Sure, please do.
And this was part of a conference call that we had earlier today with the Ponemon Institute. So in light of where we're going, and you just touched on it, in light of where we're going with cloud and mobile, and looking at what the world is really going to be over the next 5, 6, 7 years from a data security, data privacy standpoint, what do you think are the real key points, the real red flags that we should be looking at as we decide on policy going forward?
Yeah, wow, great question, and I have to stop being so long-winded so I can answer it. But the reality is 5 or 10 years out, a little bit of a crystal ball, but I think things are going to probably get worse. I mean, it's hard to imagine things getting much worse on the privacy and security front, but it is possible that some of the targeted attacks where they're kind of testing the soft underbelly of different types of organizations, there's the possibility that will kind of evolve into more of a cyber war, that which would mean which does mean that we're woefully unprepared to deal with it. Now, when these events occur, typically bad events will cause our country and our society and business organizations to come together, and I do believe that at the end things will get better. But between now and then, I think we're probably looking at a whole lot of security issues, very ugly security issues, and also some very serious privacy violations. Unfortunately, the security can improve, right? And the end state might be actually something that's very good. But privacy, once that information is out, it's leaked out, you're not going to get it back. So any privacy snafus where data about you, your sensitive and confidential information, is in the hands of the public at large, it's gone. And you just basically have to live in a world where you don't have secrets and you have very low expectations that your information is going to be protected. So I know I'm sending a very sad, negative story, but I think it will get better, though, in the end, at least on the security side.
Well, I think that definitely is food for thought for another conversation on another day, and I appreciate all of the time that you've given me through the years and today, and I really appreciate you being the first guest here on Secure 2020, and I guess I'm going to see you here in about a week, 10 days, I guess it is.
That's right, Santa Fe, our annual room renaissance.
Exactly. I can't wait. That is the most mind-expanding experience I go through each year. So with that, I thank you, Dr. Larry Ponemon, for joining us.
Thank you, Mike. You're the best.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate it. I want to thank everybody for listening to Secure 2020 today. We really hope that these shows make a difference. And for more information, you can follow us on Twitter at NCX Group. You can follow us on Facebook at NCX Group. You can even come to our website at www.ncxgroup.com. And if you have a project or something that you would like to talk to us about, please reach out, and we're happy to help in any way that we can. Thanks a lot for joining us today here on Secure 2020.
Thank you for listening to Secure 2020, presented by NCX Group. The latest updates on information security can be found at ncxgroup.com. NCX Group can also be found on Facebook and Twitter as NCX Group. Thanks for listening.